everyone. It's Jody Sutter of the Sutter Company, and welcome to my monthly LinkedIn Live. This is a time each month where I invite on a guest who has a certain area of expertise in agency business development, offers us some new perspective, some different insights on really helping us move forward in a very particular area of expertise. And today it's going to be a great conversation. It's going to be about procurement. And look, it's not an that is not an oxymoronic statement. It is going to be a great conversation about working with procurement, I promise you. But first, I just wanted to mention that I've got a few spots in a mastermind cohort that have recently opened up. And, I just finished a master class on prospecting, and I think it went very well. People seem to really respond well to it. And, one of the things that was most exciting, most gratifying is the way that people interacted, the questions that were asked, and the way people really contributed as a group, as a peer group. And wow, that's really what you get with a mastermind. And so if that's the kind of thing that sounds like it could be just sort of like that vitamin B12 shot, that monthly boost of support and insights and information, then I invite you to contact me about potentially joining one of my new business leaders mastermind groups. They're groups of no more than 5 agencies. They are non-competitive peers, but also with certain things in common, so that you have productive conversations and it's really about helping each other. So yeah, just let me know. You can send me an email. The email's right there, Jody at thesuttercompany.com. You can also head to the Sutter Company /new-business-leadership-mastermind. So that's the promotion for this month. Now let me get on to our guest. So my guest today is Michelle Gallagher. I've known Michelle for a bunch of years now. And she currently is running procurement for a really interesting company called SimpliSafe. They are a technology company that makes home security systems that are wireless, cellular, and user-friendly. When I first met Michelle, though, she was working on the agency side. And so she has a wide range of agency experience, agencies that specialize in digital, experiential, shopper marketing, promotional. And she fairly recently made the leap to the client side in procurement. And what makes her such a special guest today is that she can represent and relate to, Michelle, both clients and agencies. So it's so nice to have you here. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
Yeah. We were talking as we were getting ready to go live. Oh, and by the way, for anyone who, for those of you who are watching live, please do. I really encourage you, actually, both Michelle and I encourage you to throw some questions in the comments. And I promise I will be pretty good in making sure I'm looking at those. I've also got my team member, Megan, in the background here, and she can ping us if there's a question that really needs to be answered. So please do participate. So Michelle, hi. We were talking before going live about, oh gosh, I mean, this is a big topic, but just about how agencies in general feel about procurement. And maybe I would love to hear a little bit about your perspective, having spent a bunch of years on the agency side and now working on the client side. What do we get wrong about our perception of procurement?
It's so funny. I feel like I've switched teams since I've known you, right? So I came over to the client side, and it's been about 2.5 years now that I've been in procurement.
Yeah.
And I feel like there is such a misconception about the role of procurement in an agency relationship, and it is not to slash costs. And I know I'm working against some stereotypes that exist, and I know that perhaps there are some relationships and organizations that do take that point of view, but I'm really fortunate in that SimpliSafe is very much more about value. And the role of procurement in SimpliSafe is more of almost like a business consultant. Like, we're trying to make sure that everyone gets exactly what they need. They get it quickly and fairly. And I think the operative word for us is value. It's not really reduced cost. It's more about getting the right services for the price, and making sure that we've structured it fairly for both the agency and us.
Yeah, I often talk about from a business development perspective, I often talk about that exchange of value.
Mhm.
And the clients have the dollars and you, the agency, have the expertise. But it's I think when you can sort of see it as an exchange of value, it also brings it down to a less emotional level.
Right.
But that totally makes sense. And do you think part of that do you think SimpliSafe's in your approach to procurement also has something to do with the fact that SimpliSafe is a relatively actually, I may not have done my research on this, but SimpliSafe is a relatively new company. Is SimpliSafe a relatively new company?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're pretty
Yeah.
young. And I do think that that does matter. And I think that it's given us an opportunity. In fact, the procurement team at SimpliSafe is about the same. Let's see, it started right at the onset of the pandemic. So just
I know.
in years
I
of
like that it's been gone, it's been past for enough years that we're like at the beginning of what was that
I know,
called
what
again?
was it called again? Right? So, when they were, building their in-house expertise for procurement, they had the opportunity to, kind of not just select for skill set, and we do
Mhm.
have some team members that are classically trained in procurement, I'll say, but also
Mhm.
some of us, and I would fall in the other camp, which are subject matter experts, right? So I came into SimpliSafe with my expertise in marketing being what made me right for the position versus any sort of procurement
Mm.
skill set, which has been learned along the way and still learning. But
Yeah.
yeah, the fact that I have to like pinch myself sometimes. It's like I work in finance now. So it's been a big jump, but it's been a great one too. Because I do
Yeah.
think like that ability to see both sides of it has really helped us build some strong relationships.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about when you are working with agencies, and I guess specifically when you are talking to agencies as you are either expanding scope or you're looking at new agency relationships.
Mhm.
Gosh, there are a lot of ways my question could go, but I guess what do you find, the double barreled question, what do you find are the mistakes that agencies make the most? And what do you wish that they would do that is completely within their control, that's completely in their power to start doing?
Okay, that's a good one.
Let's start
Uh,
about mistakes first.
Mistakes. Okay. Let's see. I think that it is I think it's a misstep to isolate procurement and to think of them as separate from the quote unquote
Mm,
client team, right? Because they are facilitating the decision making for the team. In my case,
mhm,
like I think of a most recent example of making a decision for the brand team, but we also had an
yeah,
equal voice and everything. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we set each agency up optimally so that our stakeholders inside the organization can make a good decision. So I think to isolate procurement and to think of them
mhm,
separately, to think of them only as like a gatekeeper or someone you have to like check the boxes with to get to a stronger relationship within the company is kind of a misstep because it's going to start with procurement, and procurement is really not leaving, especially when you think about supplier relationship management programs
mhm,
we do, and the way we don't like to lose touch of our agencies and the partners we bring in, because that's incumbent on us to make sure that that relationship is working on both sides. And this is
yeah,
where my role as an agency sympathizer comes in, because I feel like often there's just as many things that
yeah,
the client is falling short on and not holding up their end of the deal. So you got to think about procurement all
yeah.
through.
Do you think, so quick, like, offshoot question.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I think agencies who get to work with you are probably very fortunate in that you already have this idea that, look, we are part of a team. I mean, for well, that I think is the way that I wish more marketers are saying that. Do you feel like though there are a lot of marketers who are not set up that way, who even themselves see procurement as separate?
Absolutely. And it's just
Yeah.
it makes me cringe. But, and I also understand that I'm in a bit of a unique position where I have more of a marketing background than a procurement background
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
terms of longevity. But what agencies don't do, and the opportunity they have, is to help educate their procurement managers, right? Because a lot of them in larger corporations are on a rotation,
Yeah.
or they don't have that skill set, or they just came up. They're strictly procurement, but agencies have an opportunity to help them understand the way, what a rate card is, how a scope is written, all of these things that may be foreign to them in the category, which can really, you're not only making their lives easier, but you're
Right.
also really endearing them to you because that you're taking the time to help them do their job better. And really,
Yeah.
like, that's, everybody just wants to do their
Their
job
job
well.
better.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's really important. A lot of times when I'm consulting with my clients, a big thing that I try to instill in them, especially around like more broadly, maybe in pitches, is to always think about. It sounds so manipulative, and it really isn't though, but think about the motivations of the person on the other
Right.
side. And the motivation probably is not, well, not just to conclude a successful pitch. We all have our personal motivations about self-realization and advancement in our careers and praise. And I think the more you can understand what the fears and motivations are, then the more you can create great, teammates as opposed to adversaries.
Exactly. And no procurement manager is ever going to have experience in every category that they
Mhm.
are asked to manage. So it's always worth the investment in the conversation and saying, "Hey, is there anything about," in my case, it was sonic branding, right? We had to find a partner
Yeah.
for that. It's something I hadn't, worked in before, but we found a great partner and one who was really willing to. I just got to ask him some questions and we started noodling around. And it not only it's almost like a chemistry check then too, because you realize that the agency is willing to go to that length to help the
Yeah.
professional understand the space and, kind of a little bit more about it, then that really bodes well for the agency.
I have to ask, in that particular instance, did they contact you proactively, to say, "Hey, I know we're talking to you, but do you, as a procurement professional, need more information?" Or did you contact them proactively?
I think it was a bit of a joint, it was a bit mutual. We were having a
Yeah.
discussion. I think we were probably exchanging like the NDAs we're in, and we were kind of RFIing. And
Mhm. Yeah.
I said, wow, this is something. I said, this is a completely new area for me. I
Yeah.
haven't had exposure to this type of, marketing before. And they're like, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. And they just went off and it was great.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think
Mhm.
I think you're right. I don't think agencies do that enough. I
No,
think they feel like, and part of it's because they feel like, well, procurement is this necessary evil, and we'll get
right.
to it when we get to it. Um, but would you, I mean, do you think that agencies should include you in their outreach? And if so, I'd be curious also, do you ever get those, sort of proactive calls like, "Hi, this is agency ABC. You don't work with us. We don't even know if you need us now, but we'd love to tell you more about us." And how
I
do you
do
handle
get
those?
those. I
You do.
do, and I don't, admittedly, I don't follow up on a lot of them, but I appreciate it when it comes through, especially when it's done
Yeah.
in when it's couched in, "Could we at least get on your list, for
Mhm.
consideration?" It may not be the right time, and those are the ones that I really appreciate, not the ones
Yeah.
that say, "Click here to schedule time with me," because I'm like, "Wait a second, like, I didn't ask for this," but, I think the ones that reach out are wonderful, and then some reach out and they are maybe with an organization I'm super familiar with just from my years in the business, and then I can have a
Yeah.
conversation with them and say, "Yeah, I'm totally familiar with agency X and would definitely consider you for anything. I know so and tell them I said hi." You know, so yeah,
If
um,
it's okay, this is going beyond procurement a bit, but I guess it's also, I've got this on my brain, having
yeah,
just finished my prospecting masterclass with some clients. So the other thing also you'd mentioned, I thought this was like very reassuring, that you'll get some outreach from an agency, and there might not be the need, but you put them aside. So I think that's
mhm,
also, I think, reassuring to know people that folks like Michelle do have that file. It does exist, even if you don't hear back from someone like Michelle right away. Do you,
absolutely.
do you find that, what I try to get my clients to do is to present themselves by sort of presenting a bit of a common issue that they observe and try to and intend to solve successfully over and over and over again. So rather than just saying, "We're a great agency, we do fantastic work, please keep us in mind," sort of understanding that, say, for SimpliSafe, I'm not sure what your consistent marketing challenges are. I bet there are a lot of them, and I bet agencies who have identified you as their ideal client have a good idea of what they are. Do you find that when an agency, I'm sort of leading the witness a bit, but when an agency identifies a potential issue that you are more or less likely to engage? Does it make a difference?
Oh, it definitely does, and it keeps me
Okay.
reading, right, on the email because
Mm,
it's when I see someone say something about like, like we are a challenger brand in the space. And so
yeah.
when I can tell when someone's actually done their homework about SimpliSafe when they do the outreach.
Mm,
It doesn't have to be a lot. This doesn't have to
yeah.
be a cumbersome, time consuming thing, but you should probably know something about the home security space before you reach out to us. And when you do, then there's the credibility. Like you can spot a mile away the ones that are just like the absolute you're on a list and you just get the outreach. So I appreciate when people do take the time.
Yeah. I think it's interesting also because I think doing the research, I know from way back when I was doing this, I was also one of these people, I was one of those business development people that was sometimes prone to hiding behind the research. Like, well, I'm not quite ready to call Michelle, who doesn't know me. I'm going to do 2 more hours of research. And so then you do a lot of research and you don't actually take the action to
Yeah.
make the introduction. So I think that I think there's some basic things that one can learn about the home security category. I also encourage my clients if they're not working in that category, what makes something like SimpliSafe an ideal client? And try to I borrow a phrase from a friend of mine, another consultant. How are you building that credibility bridge between, say, the consumer packaged goods type of work that you
Mhm.
do and SimpliSafe? So it's not just like, hey, here's some great work that we just did for Jello and for this direct to consumer
Right,
brand. It's like what we know about working with these things is how, I
right,
don't know, how new moms shop for stuff and why safety is important.
right, right.
And then
Find something in common, right?
yeah,
Just find something like, oh, by the way, we're also based in Boston. It doesn't have to be something that's absolutely, just great. It could just be a commonality in, a shared city. It could
that's
be
interesting.
you've done a lot of work in a retailer where our products are, like that. Those are the kind of things that just show a bit of knowledge about us and are enough to keep the door open for opportunity.
Yeah. 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 My theory is that when you're able to create that true, that authentic link. I was just listening to someone who was bashing, I think it was Scott Galloway, who was like bashing the word authentic. And so now I'm very careful about it. But still that authentic link between what an agency does and what you need to hear from them.
Right.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so agencies start including procurement people in your pitches. So we just got a question in from Kirsten. Kirsten, I don't know if I'll pronounce your last name correctly, Modesto. I hope. Thank you for this. The procurement piece feels not good, or when it feels not good is when you hold on. Let me make sure I read this right. The procurement piece that feels not good is when you do have to agree on a rate card. Again, and Michelle, you and I had talking about this. Agencies can game those numbers so many ways, retainer hours, averages. It ends up feeling sleazy at our end or unfair when you compare a small shop to a big one. Do you have any insights or advice around this? So
Yeah.
again, we could probably spend the rest of the
Yeah.
time talking about this, but yeah, a little bit about what you guys are looking for and
Yes.
what you hope and how you hope agencies will respond. Thank you, Kirsten, for the question.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Kirsten, because we could talk about this the rest of the time. So you think about how many different ways an agency is trying to impress an organization, right? Like more than likely your creative shops have to be, front and center, your strategic thinking.
Mhm.
Those are such critical things. But then people in my role have to figure out a way to compare these agencies, right? So there's brilliant creative everywhere. There's brilliant strategy because everyone's saying there is, right? Okay, so now how do we start to narrow down on your differences, right? So I do ask for rate cards, and I get, I don't like being told that an agency won't share them. One, because it feels like that's not transparent, and I don't know what
Mm,
you're hiding. And I can understand your point of view. Trust me, because I've been there, but I feel like it's almost, it's the price of admission. Like I need to see something where I can at least compare an account director across the board and see what that rate is. You can give me a card or any procurement person, you can give me a rate card. You can also say like, this is a starting point. This is something that is subject to negotiation. This is, depending on the volume of business, this can fluctuate. I think there's also, you can offer a blended rate, capability. There are all sorts of ways to present it and check that box, but also know that let the team know, the people reading the RFP response, let them know that it's absolutely negotiable and it's a starting point, and no one will ever just dismiss you out of hand because your rate card might be the highest. Like, you know how that works. Like, I'm trying to help a team make a good decision. And if they fall in love with your creative, then I've got to find a way to make that work financially, right?
Right.
Like, you're not going, if you have brilliant creative and a high rate card, okay, well then let's keep talking, like, let's find a solution and get into negotiation there. It wouldn't just dismiss you outright.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. And I've got a couple of questions that are bubbling up.
Good.
See if I can remember all of them. So one of them would be around this, like, well, first of all, one of the things I also encourage my clients to do, and I'll be interested in knowing if you think this is a good idea, if I should stop advising them, is to ask, to be willing to ask the questions about why things are being asked that way. And sometimes, I always say, sometimes you won't get a response. Okay, well then, but you keep moving forward. Sometimes you'll get exactly the response that you think you're going to get. But you know what? I always think you're going to, if you can engage the client and have a conversation, tell me a little bit more about why you need the numbers this way.
Right.
Because then it opens up the door for offering alternatives. Well, we as an agency, our policy is not to offer a rate cards in this way, but we could help you in this way. Would that be useful?
Mm-hmm.
Now you're actually a collaborator, not an order taker.
Right. And think about if you refuse, right? And I've got 5 agencies on the short list, and it's not something I would ask for in the RFI. Like, that's, who's got time for that? So when you're on let's even say it's 3 agencies on the short list, and 2 of them will give me their rate card and 1 won't. Like, what I have to do some analysis, and I don't know how to include you in that if you don't give me some point of comparison that allows me to do my assessment, and again, nobody is making that decision based on price, especially for agencies, and it's not to say procurement's not going to work hard to get the best price from you, but your work always leads, and then the rates follow. But make sure you're giving your procurement person, especially in these RFPs. And here's another one where I'm just gonna, this is a little bit of a pet peeve that I see now. Like, answer the RFI, especially RFI, RFP, answer it the way that you're being asked to answer it. And then it's almost like a yes and, like, answer it the way that we're asking you to, so that you are helping that person do their job, right? So if they want to see, the top 5 retailers you have experience in, please give that. But you can also supplement and say, and we have this, and this, or, we are, just, there's so many opportunities to add on to a response, but to kind of take your own route in a response. It's a little, just at least on the things that are very much like, the formulaic responses that need to get answered, like, just do that.
I talk about that a lot too. Like, there's a reason why they're being asked this way. I mean, a lot of things that drive us crazy are like the Arebas, answering through a sourcing system, or the Excel spreadsheets, or the Google Sheets. But yeah, again, if you know that the reason a marketer or procurement professional is asking for that is because they need some way, and sometimes it's also, by the way, just not you who is reviewing this. It's a group. Sometimes it's a cast of thousands. Sometimes it's different department heads, depending on the size of the company. And I also wonder, I don't know if I've ever actually got this confirmed, but my theory is that if you are managing a pitch on the client side, and you've got, say, 6 department heads, that you got to make sure that they see what they need to feel okay to weigh in on the agency choice. So I even wonder, is my RFP being chopped up? And so head of digital marketing is getting this, head of strategy is getting that.
Yeah, it's getting chopped. It's getting summarized. It's going to look this way for this person. This person wants to see numbers. This person wants to see that. Like, everyone, like, again, it started out saying how many different ways an agency wants to impress, a potential client. So everybody's looking for something different. And that's when it's, here's another tiny, tiny thing, but it's a pet peeve. Like when you see a question and maybe it's a bit duplicative and you say, please see response in 7A. Well, then, just cut and paste
go
the same.
back.
It's
Yeah.
really that, like, and again, like I can't speak for everyone in the business, but I really truly try. Every RFP, at least that I've done, is very bespoke to the situation. I kind of get kidded about that a lot because I feel like I'm writing a short story every time I do an RFP, because nothing can fall into that little Excel grid that everyone sends out. It's just not that it's not that easy. So I think, take the opportunity to fill out the Excel grid, but also some liberties on that.
Well, I think that's also really interesting. I want to get to that in a moment, but just like one quick point as well. I also believe that even though you are maybe duplicating answers or only given 200 words, there's still, it's like creativity is born when you're pushing against boundaries. So you can still have a very persuasive, you can still have persuasive language even within those restrictions.
Right. The freedom of a tight brief, right?
Yeah.
Really, like it's true, like be succinct, put it on there, and then go crazy on another aspect of it.
So I also want to know, you just also brought up another interesting point about how you are kind of whether they've asked you to or not, you're kind of the advocate for agencies because you spend so much time at agencies.
Yes.
And so do you think there's also still a fair amount of work to be done to make sure that agencies get a better brief for the RFIs, RFPs?
I think that there's a lot of work to be done on timing, because I think that the clients will often underestimate what it takes to have a creative element in a response.
Yeah.
So there are often times we'll try to, I'll hopefully, try to sidestep that, because I feel like there are better ways. I think, chemistry, I think, is having a chemistry session is one of the biggest, most important things you can do. And so often we'll have RFIs presented, right? It's not just something we'll read, because it's an initial check there and kind of helps us understand. And I think there's so much, anybody can write a response to an RFP, but it's that live Q&A when you ask a question where you really start to see if you're going to be a match, from a values perspective, from a personality perspective. So I would caution any agency, if you're, and I think this goes without saying, but if you're not going to get access to the decision makers and to the clients beyond procurement, but including procurement, then it might not be the right opportunity, because I can't imagine just, holding agencies at arm's length and expecting them just to respond to what's been said without getting a little bit of a Q&A session or something more, just to get some insight there. So I think there's work to be done on timing. There's work to be just general expectations on what you feel, you kind of have to like maybe talk to your stakeholders a little bit and say, okay, what are the things you need to make a decision? Just start there. Like, do you need to see, spec creative, or would you like to see more cases of issues they've solved for that are similar to what we're trying to solve for? And
I might even say, again, for on more the agency side, to say like our policy is not to show spec creative. However, we can show creative that was approved by the client, that addressed similar issues, that
went to
in
market.
the marketplace.
Yep.
Was successful.
Totally agree. Totally agree. No agency has the background they need to do a great job with that creative in an RFP. So I think it's a bit unfair to ask.
Yeah. This always happens. We're like almost at the bottom of the hour. So I'm torn between a couple of final questions, but maybe we'll stick with the conversation around chemistry. I actually have I don't know, I have some opinions about chemistry. I used to be a big believer. I'm still a big believer. I think we do hire people that we know, like, and trust, but I think agencies sometimes overemphasize or over-index on the importance of chemistry. And I guess what I've come to realize or come to believe is that you can be a flaming jerk, but if you're the best at what you do, you're probably going to get hired. Having said that, it's really like the ideal, like if you have a matrix, right? Flaming jerk and not good at what you do, not going to be hired. fantastic, wonderful person to work with and the best at what you do, definitely going to be hired. But I guess tell me a little bit more. When you say chemistry, have you ever found agencies that go in and and they're trying to win on just being nice? And has that failed?
No.
Okay.
I don't
Well,
want
that's good.
to see someone come in and be nice. I want someone to come in and be smart. I want someone to tell us that, sure, they could answer the brief, but a smarter way to approach us would be X. And we did have an agency for a separate for an RFP where we were asking for some support in a retailer, and what we had prescribed was one thing, and then they said, sure, but have you considered this? And it really was an amazing moment. So that was great. So chemistry, I know it's
Yeah.
like that's a word that's overused on a lot of things. But what I love about getting to know the people behind the agency, behind the capabilities deck, behind the sizzle reel is really understanding their approach and how they think, and who has thought about our business before they even came in the room, to speak to us. So I think it's that live, that Q&A that really helps me understand almost the seriousness, like the desire to have our business, versus people who have just come in and they've sent the same Cape stack they send to everybody, and they give the
Yeah.
same speech, and it's all about them, the
Yeah.
agency, and it's nothing about us.
Yeah.
So that in room is very telling, because again, anyone can put anything on paper and send it
Yeah.
in and look great, but talk to me about how you got to this work, or
Yeah.
what your philosophy is, or what your values are.
All right. I'm going to sneak in one more question because
Okay.
I sort of teased this and I said we would answer, we would talk about this. In those meetings, maybe it's not even chemistry, maybe it's moving towards the final pitch. Um, which, okay, what should an agency do? Should an agency bring the team that's going to work on the business? And what if the team isn't actually hired yet? Or should they bring their best presenters, who may also be the senior people who can answer some significant questions about what it's like to work with the agency?
Yeah, can I say both, kind of? Because number one, it's unfair. It's
Yeah.
it's grossly unfair to think that you can meet everyone in the room who will work on your business, because it hasn't been scoped. You don't know the time. There's a lot of things that are at play. Timing, all these, I'd rather wait for the right ECD who's coming off a project to come on my business than for you to bring someone who's not suitable.
Just happens to be available.
Right. Like no agency,
Yeah.
I try to say this all the time. It's like no agency has a bench of talent just waiting for the next opportunity. No, that's not how
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
works. So it's a little bit unfair to ask that. But I think when you can get senior people in the room, and ones who are very passionate about the business and very connected to it, not people who are like up here and never get down into the actual, goings on of each client, like
Yeah.
those are the people who have the most credibility. And those are the people too who, when they explain who's in the room and what role they'd have,
Right.
it starts to make more sense.
Yeah. And it's really great that you're also there for SimpliSafe, because you can then be that the feedback going back to your team to say to basically represent the agency as well, to say it's unreasonable to think that the team is ready and waiting. And by the way, you wouldn't want that because you'd be charged for it eventually. Eventually, they'd figure out how to work it into their fees eventually. And the value that the senior people do have as representatives of the agency as a whole. And I guess what I would also add too is I think in general, we don't give our junior teams a chance to get good at business development.
Right.
Mentor them, get them in the room, even if they've got smaller roles, or just like get them out talking to clients, even in a non-pitch situation. But
Right.
yeah. And so then you're more likely to, I think that's sometimes the thing as well, is it's not only, well, maybe we don't have them hired, but it's like, I know who I want to lead this business, but they're not a very good presenter, or they're inexperienced. And
Right.
well, that's an avoidable situation.
Right.
Michelle, this has been so great. I don't want to keep you too long. Is there anything else that you'd want to pass
Oh my
along to
God.
folks that, yeah, I know, what a loaded question, but
I know. And we haven't even talked about scoping, all that there's so
oh,
much to this again.
well, maybe we can have you back.
Oh, I
That's
love
something
it.
I've been starting to do, is getting people to come back and we have part 2 of the discussion.
I love it. I don't know. Like writing scopes is a weird thing to be passionate about, but that's kind of
Ooh.
where I fall. No, I think
Really
just
important and so hard.
consider the human aspect of the procurement role, right? And the fact, like, think about, like, okay, what's their job? You can ask them, like, what can I do to make this easier for you to assess? Or, just talk.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
don't assume procurement is there to make sure you don't get money, right? Because that's not the point at all. We want to be your favorite client, right? Like,
Yeah.
we don't, there's a healthy balance in that negotiation, making sure the agency's paid fairly.
Yeah.
And, we don't want to be the ones who are just driving it down and down,
Yeah.
So,
Well, the other thing I also remind agencies too is that by the time they get to that stage of a pitch where you're negotiating a contract and fees, the client has a lot invested in this as
yes.
well. And so I think agencies do worry like, well, I don't want to piss the client off. But you know what? Of course, you shouldn't piss the client off just to do that. But if you're standing up for what you believe is going to create the environment for doing the best work for this client, then don't be afraid to represent that.
And on the
Negotiations
client
back and
side,
forth.
I had a stakeholder who was afraid to ask for a rate reduction or for that conversation about off the
Mhm.
rate card, and I'm like, every agency is expecting this question and expecting this
Hmm.
conversation.
Yeah,
So, again, to the agencies, like, hold firm to what you need to hold firm on, but, it is a negotiation, and so many
yeah,
different things, so many different inputs come in, that don't be afraid to share the rate card and just share it with all of those factors considered in.
yeah, yeah. This has been a real pleasure. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being here today, and we'll get you back because we also didn't talk that much about negotiation either. And yeah,
Right?
and thank you everyone for watching this. If you're watching live, thank you, Kirsten, for our one question answer. Totally appreciate that. Thank you. And if you do have any other questions, burning questions for Michelle or questions for me, you can also email me at jody@thesuttercompany.com. You can also put comments in the comment section on the events page of the Sutter Company LinkedIn page. We look at them. We make sure we check that page every day, and we will definitely get back to you. And I'm happy to ferry questions to get questions to Michelle. All right. Thank you so much, Michelle. It was great to
Thanks,
see you.
Jody.